So since we're talking about the Bodhisattva ethical restraints, and they mainly have to do with subduing the self-centered thought, then it's important to again and again reflect on the disadvantages of our self-centered thought, and to also very astutely observe how our self-centered thought manifests, even when we've made a strong determination not to have it manifest, how it comes up out of left field and takes over a situation. And so to be aware of that, and then to see the disadvantages, and then to look at the situation in a different way so that we can counteract the influence of the self-centered thought. Because if we just notice it and don't do anything, then nothing really changes. So we have to repeatedly keep counteracting the influence of that self-centered thought. And so we do that in our daily lives around small things, and we do it also in terms of the spiritual path, so that we don't think just of our own liberation, but instead the enlightenment of all living beings. And so with that in mind, then we'll share the Dharma now. Okay, so there was a few questions to go through. First of all, just because we're nearing the end of the retreat, then I think beginning next week, what we'll do is we'll put one session of the Bodhisattva ethical restraints a week online for the people who will watch. And if you've been counting your mantra, then and you haven't finished by this weekend, then that's fine. Just keep counting. Yeah, just those of you especially doing Bodhisattva, then just keep doing it, once a day until you've completed your count. Or if you've been doing the Guru Yoga, same thing. And the people who are doing the retreat from afar, just because the retreat is over here, doesn't mean you have to stop the practice. Sometimes I get letters from inmates saying, "Oh, I enjoyed the retreat so much. I was so sorry to see it end." And it's like, it doesn't have to end. If you're enjoying it, you just keep doing it. Yeah. Okay. And then we had a question here about intuition. And what is it? What are the pros and cons? Is it something that can be developed, or do we just have to uncover it? And what's the relationship between intellect and intuition? And all I can say is I don't know the answer to any of those questions. Yeah, I've never heard this. I've heard Westerners ask teachers this question a lot, but I've never heard a Tibetan talk about intuition. There's talk about super knowledges, in other words, where you have different supernormal powers to know things in the past, or to read other people's minds, or to know things in the future. So there's talk about that. And some of those supernormal powers, people have because of karma, but they're not necessarily reliable, and they only last for this lifetime. But the ones that are more reliable are ones that you get through attaining the jhanas, the form realm absorptions, and on the basis of the fourth jhana, then developing these supernormal powers. But even though these are not as accurate as the Buddhas, because we always hear the story of the old man, remember, who was crying because Shariputra and Moggallana wouldn't, Shariputra wouldn't ordain him because he didn't see him having the karma. But, the Buddha had the full super knowledge and was able to see that, yes, he had created the karma to ordain. So our regular intuition, it's our kind of, I feel like this, or what we were talking about the other day about the vibes, I don't know. Personally speaking, I don't trust my intuition all that much, If I have, clear things that I've noticed in the environment that I can really, link things to and so on, I'll listen to those. But this feeling of, I like somebody or I don't like somebody or something's going to happen or this, I don't listen to that very much because it doesn't usually do much good. In my experience, when I've listened to it, it really hasn't done anything much. But then there's other things where you learn from experience in different situations how to handle different situations that happen, and so that is, some kind of knowledge from experience that you can apply when you sense certain dynamics going on in a particular situation. Is that how you meant it, or what did you mean by intuition? Because
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like kind of the super knowledge thing.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I was reading the interview that is in the Insight Interface Insight,
Mm-hmm.
and it said, in Buddhism, there isn't a split between intellect and feeling, or between intellect and intuition. And that, I don't know, something is right.
Ah.
Because intuition, I always think that it's very irrational.
Yes.
So I was wondering what was the link between intellect and intuition.
Yeah. It's more that there isn't a split between heart and mind. Not between intellect and intuition, but between, because I don't even know I've never heard a Lama talk about intuition. I don't even know if there's a Tibetan word for it. But, between our intellect that knows things conceptually, and then our heart that, kind of feels and experiences things, we don't have a split between those in the sense that those are all functions of the consciousness or functions of the mind. That, I think, is what is meant. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have any comments about this? Okay. Then we had another one. Okay. Asking about why is it not necessary to take the lay precepts before taking the Bodhisattva vow? So actually, Lama Atisha said that the 7 pratimoksha precepts, there's usually 8, but here we're omitting the one-day precepts because they're too short. But the other 7, as being lay people, the monastic precepts. Okay, those are the ideal prerequisites, not others, for taking the Bodhisattva precepts. So that's the ideal way. So many of the lamas say it's not necessary to have taken all the 5 precepts. The person who asked the question said, but but what about if you're drinking and drugging, and then how in the world are you going to keep the Bodhisattva precepts? I mean, you probably won't even be able to keep the pratimoksha precepts, and they're easier to keep. And I completely agree, I mean, I don't know. I think it would be much more difficult to keep the Bodhisattva precepts, any kind of precepts, if you're taking intoxicants. Yeah, so Yeah. And they said you need to take the 5 precepts before taking the novice ordination as a monk or nun. Yes, definitely. You have to have all 5 precepts, and then you take the novice, and you need to have that before you can take the full ordination. And then they asked, why does it seem like the Nyingmas don't practice the 5th precept as strictly as the Gelug? That you have to ask other people. I have no idea. Yeah, I suppose the people who take the precept about not drinking keep it very strictly, and the people who don't keep it. You know, so and so you're going to have people in each tradition who keep it strictly and people who don't keep it strictly. Lots of times people ask me, why do these other people do this or that, or why do they not do this or that? And, you know, and I found that sometimes I try and share my ideas about it, and then I've realized, no, I can't really do that because they're just my ideas. If we want to know why somebody else is doing or not doing something, it's better to ask those people. Yeah. Don't ask me. I can't read anybody's mind to tell you why they do or don't do anything. Yeah. And within any tradition, of course, there's going to be a variety of different people who practice quite differently. Okay? And then there was, why doesn't everybody follow the guidelines as they're written about how to practice? You know, like like we have the gradual path laid out, and and Tantra's at the end, and here's how you do things. And why does it seem that many people don't follow that? Again, better to ask those people. Okay, I have no idea why they do what they do or don't do what they don't do. I mean, I think in terms of some of the lamas giving these initiations, I have my ideas about why they do that, but it's much better to actually ask them. And in terms of the people who request all these different teachings and who try and practice the very advanced teachings, why they request those teachings, is better to ask those people. It's not really fair for me to try and speak about somebody else and why they do what they do. Okay? I wonder if you'll go and actually ask them. It's kind of easier to ask me because, then I can say whatever, and then you think you have an answer. But to go and actually ask the person, then it's like, oh, maybe they won't like my question, or they'll blame me, or. But I mean, that's really true, especially, I mean, on any kind of thing, even when we have difficulties with somebody, instead of talking to other people about our problems, we need to talk to the person themselves. Yeah, so on these kinds of things too, to actually go and say, I don't understand, please explain to me. And then you'll get a real explanation. Yeah. And then why doesn't everybody take the Pratimoksha vow? Same thing. Ask them. I can tell you why I took it, but I can't tell you why other people don't take it. No? Did I understand your questions? Yeah? Okay. So, I wasn't very much help on those questions. But it's much more honest to tell you what I know and what I don't know than to try and make stuff up. Okay. Okay, so did we do number 15 last time, not rejecting disrepute, about how important it was when people have a bad impression of us to correct that impression. So if we made a mistake, to acknowledge that we made a mistake, and if we didn't make a mistake but people have a bad impression of us, or they're judging us or whatever, and they have wrong information, then to go and talk to them and explain what the situation was. So this is very different than being defensive, okay? Because lots of times people will say things to us that we don't like, and we feel like we have to explain ourselves, you know. And our motivation is basically because we don't want people to think badly of us, so we're very attached to our reputation. Yeah. So, you know, we were talking about it, and you know, somebody just makes some comment, and then, you know, like, oh, I've got to explain myself because they saw me do this and they're going to think bad of me. And so, you know, and so it's basically just defensiveness, attachment to reputation. Okay? So we're not talking about that. Yeah, because that kind of defensive attachment to reputation, that's garbage. That's part of the afflicted mind. What we're talking about here is really caring about other people and knowing that if they have a wrong impression of us, or if they have a bad impression of us, then it's going to interfere with our ability to be of benefit to them. And they won't derive as much benefit. And so because we want that, then we want to correct whatever misunderstanding there was, so that then, you know, when we make suggestions or give instructions or whatever, then they'll take it to heart instead of just thinking, oh, that person, I don't like them, go away, you know, and not listening to anything. Okay? So keeping this precept isn't done out of attachment to reputation. And it's not done out of a defensive thing of, you know, I got to explain myself so that they don't think bad of me. Okay? So this is very important to know the difference within yourself when you're getting defensive and when you're really caring about, you know, what somebody else is thinking, and caring about, you know, being able to benefit them and getting rid of impediments to doing that. Okay. Then number 16, also from Chandra Goman, says not correcting others despite their afflictions. Here it says not correcting one's own deluded actions or not helping others to correct theirs. Okay? So this one's, the wording's a bit broader, you know. When we're under the power of afflictions, not doing something about our own afflicted actions, or if we see other people acting under the power of afflictions, not saying something to them, if we think it'll be beneficial to them to help them not create so much negative karma. Yeah? So, he says, the 16th secondary misdeed emphasizes our responsibility for the behavior of others. When we have the opportunity to favorably influence people who are behaving badly and can see that treating them harshly will put an end to their negative conduct, we must not hesitate to do so. If we remain silent simply because we are afraid of irritating them, it is a misdeed associated with afflictions. Okay? So I've talked a lot about living in community, and that one of the ways that we help each other is by pointing things out to each other. And if somebody is breaking a precept, or somebody is acting improperly or in a disrespectful way, or if they're doing something harmful or thinking something, you know, harmful, then it's good to go to that person and talk to them about it and say, you know, I saw this happening, and you know, please explain to me how you're thinking. And then if they're thinking in the way you thought they did, then to discuss it with them and point out the disadvantages and point out how they can change the situation, or think differently, or different kinds of, you know, ways they could handle it. But lots of times we don't do that. Okay? And it could be because last time, like I was saying, the other person, whenever we've tried to do that before, their walls come up and they're prickly and they get mad at us, and we just go, okay, have it your way, you know? And out of attachment to ourselves, when we just don't even say anything to those people because they're very unpleasant when their buttons are pushed. Okay? So in those kinds of situations, you have to ask yourself, is it going to be beneficial to say something to that person, even if their buttons get pushed at this moment, maybe later on they'll think about what we talked about and it'll kind of wake them up about something. So you have to think, is that a likely thing to happen? Or is it more likely that they're just going to get angry and tune me out, in which case then it wouldn't be a misdeed to not go and talk to them about it. You know, if you really felt like it's just, you know, not going to do any good, then don't do it. But if it's just because you're afraid yourself, you know, oh, then I'm going to have to deal with this person who's angry, and then they're not going to like me, and they'll take it out on me, and, you know, and all this self-concern is coming up, then that's not a good motivation, is it? It's self-centeredness, isn't it? You know, you just go ahead, you can act negatively, you can break your precepts, you can do whatever you want. And I'm not saying anything because it's just too unpleasant for me to say anything. Yeah? But if you do like that, then, you know, then the discipline in a monastery goes down. Then people don't have the opportunity to learn, you know, and everybody just tiptoes around everybody else because everybody else is so good at, you know, the moment somebody says something, they flare up and so then everybody goes, okay, I won't say anything to anybody. But then, you know, then what's it like? Yeah, then everybody's walking around on eggshells, and people continue all their bad habits, and the discipline in the community doesn't work well. Yeah. So, you know, you really have to come back and to really care about what's going on with somebody. And it doesn't mean that you always go and talk to them and push your thing, because sometimes we're just being, you know, critical and judgmental and picking at people. But when you really see that somebody's kind of going down a wrong path, yeah, and it's a Dharma friend and you care about them, then even if they're going to get mad, you know, because you care about them, then, you know, you say it. If you think in the end it'll, you know, it'll work out. And I've had to do that many times, you know, and people get mad at me. Yeah, but hopefully in the end, you know, my purpose was that they think about what I said, and you know, maybe at some point some bells will ring. I don't know. Okay, but lots of times people don't want to say anything, and then they just come and tell me, and they wait for me to do it. Thank you. Okay. This refers to situations where we see that by dealing with people severely, we could help them correct themselves, but we do not want to get involved. We say nothing because we fear they might take offense. So this is like parents who don't discipline their kids because they want to be their kids' friends. You know, and this is kind of my generation on down, you know, the parents want to be the kids' friends. So even the kids misbehave, the parents don't want to say anything because the kids will get mad. And they want their kids to like them. That's the most important thing. You know, not that they teach their kids to grow up to be responsible individuals, but that their kids like them. And I think that's skewed, you know, because I think you really, I mean, when you're a parent or when you're in any kind of position of guiding somebody, you know, your chief responsibility is to guide them properly in a responsible way. And if at times they don't like you, what to do? You know, hopefully they'll understand through your behavior that you're doing it because you actually care, not because you're trying to harm. Yeah? Uh-huh.
I think that it's kind of like that a fear for friends that, oh, I prefer to don't have any problem.
Yeah.
And that prefers to don't say nothing to another person because always think about the consequence of that. And but why you are not doing that is peor, como se dice?
Worse. Yes. Yes.
Worse.
Yeah.
I see it in my life, but I see it with friends that say, I prefer that I don't have any problem. That's why I
Yeah.
can say nothing. But you see, the result of that is worse.
It's worse. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So, it's this delicate balance, because we don't want to go poking in everybody else's business, and our job isn't to correct everybody. And sometimes our mind is just exaggerating things, But on the other hand, like you say, if we just say, oh, I prefer not to get involved, then you see people really going down the slippery slope and the situation getting worse, And especially with kids, I think that kids really need structure. And when the parents just are like afraid to say anything to the kids because the kids are going to get mad, I mean, then who's running the household? The kids are running the house. The kids snap their fingers and the parents salute and say, what can I do? Yeah. And, and then many problems, you're right, really get worse that way because we don't say anything.
Yes, because in the world, it's completely different than in the house.
Mm.
We always, I said that this kind of style
Mm-hmm.
is have, I don't know how to say it in English, but it's that in house never say nothing, but in the world they're going to have that big problem.
Right.
They don't know how it's going to respond for that.
Right. Right.
They think that it's the same house world and it's not.
Yes.
Not true.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So what you're saying is if kids get used to certain kind of things being handled in certain ways in the house, they're going to expect the world to treat those situations in the same way, but the world doesn't. And then it's a big surprise for the kids, and it's very difficult for them because people in the rest of the world don't put up with the same kind of stuff that their parents do because the parents are trying to please the kids. Yeah, and it's kind of unfair, because when you think of it, one of the most important things that children need to learn is how to deal with the frustration of not getting everything you want. Don't you think? Isn't that an important thing to learn? Because constantly in life we're faced with not getting what we want and things not turning out the way we want them to turn out. And if our parents don't teach us how to deal with that frustration, because they always rearrange everything to please us, then we go out in the world and we really don't know how to handle our frustration. And it becomes a big problem. Yeah? Okay. An exception is when people's misbehavior is insignificant and concerns mainly affairs of this life alone, and interfering would pain them and distress them deeply. So, if it's something insignificant, just a small thing, it's no big deal, leave it. We don't have to go around correcting everybody, because otherwise we'll drive everybody crazy, okay? When they would benefit only briefly from our intervention, or when it could at best bring about a very short-lived change in them, then it's better to remain silent. Okay, so small thing, not a big deal. Yeah. It's kind of, what do they say, pick your battles carefully? Yeah. So, if you're living with somebody, you can't correct every little thing. You look at what are the big things that are really important. The same is true when our efforts would create great obstacles for them. Okay, so don't want to do that. In short, this misdeed consists of letting others make serious mistakes when we could do something to prevent it. The present secondary misdeed, as well as the previous, are both contrary to an aspect of the Bodhisattva ethic of helping others, which is eliminating the harmful activities of others. Okay, so so this is, letting people do negative things because we don't want to get involved. Now, I remember when I used to live in Seattle and I would walk around Green Lake and sometimes I would see people fishing, you know. Now, I knew I can't go up to perfect strangers and say, don't fish. That's not going to fly, and they're not going to listen to me, and they're going to get a bad impression about Buddhism, and it'll just start an argument, you know. So in those kind of situations, I make prayers for them, I make prayers for the fish, okay? Now, if it were somebody that I knew, that I had a good relationship with, then, you know, it would be appropriate to say something, if you think that person could possibly listen. And sometimes you know, things are very serious and people will just get mad at you, and you know, but if you feel it's worth it to get them to look at something and think about something, then you know, that's keeping this precept. Excuse me. So you see that sometimes practicing the Bodhisattva path means you really have to put your reputation online, you know, and our reputation is one of the things we cherish the most, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Then there's 4 misdeeds contrary to the practice of patience, far-reaching patience. So number 17, Chandragoman says, responding to verbal abuse with verbal abuse and so forth. Here it says, returning insults, anger, beating, or criticism with insults or the like. Okay? In other words, retaliating. Okay? So the Great Way says that this misdeed amounts to failing to maintain the causes of patience within us. It consists of behaving in a way that is contrary to the 4 factors of the practice of virtue, by responding to verbal abuse with similar abuse, to anger with wrath, to blows with blows, and to criticism with censure. The first, for example, is the wish to say something very unpleasant in response to what someone said to us that made us angry. The misdeed is necessarily associated with afflictions. So this is, glasses have a big spot. It's not coming out and I have to live with it. So he says in the sutras, Lord Buddha taught us not to retaliate in the following 4 situations. When insulted, scolded, accused, or spoken to rudely, then to not talk that same way back to the other person. When exposed to somebody's anger, so somebody's angry at us, then we get angry at them. When somebody hits us, then to hit them back. And when somebody criticizes us, to criticize them back. Or criticize them behind if they criticize us behind our back, then we criticize them behind their back. So this is called the supreme ascetic practice. Yeah, we usually think of ascetic practices as, very little food and, it's cold and you give up all these pleasures. But this is actually said to be the supreme ascetic practice. Because it's much more difficult, isn't it? When somebody does something to us that we don't like, what's our instant reaction? Do it back. And actually that's very often what we're taught as children. They hit you, hit it back. They screamed at you, you scream back. And this is the example we see on TV, how people behave. This is just, common worldly behavior. And here we're told not to do it. So you can see it's a real ascetic practice to abandon it. Okay? So if we investigate what disrupts our life most, we will chiefly find these 4 circumstances. True, isn't it? What makes us unhappy the most? We get insulted. We get criticized. People get angry at us. They beat us. Yeah. When we are subjected to somebody's anger, for example, if we can exercise patience and fortitude, remain calm, and avoid responding by getting angry in turn, we will enjoy greater peace of mind. Okay. Now, sometimes when I'm in the prisons, when I say something like that, the guys roll their eyes and they look at me and they say, "You're out of your mind, you know. If you don't retaliate here, then they're just going to walk all over you." And I have a different view. I mean, I haven't been in prison, so I can't speak from experience. But what I can say is that when people do things deliberately to get your goat, if you react in fear, even though you come on strong to them and might scream or yell or whatever, they've won because they've got your goat. You know, we got afraid and we got hyped up about it, and we bit the hook, basically. So we bit the hook, okay? Whereas I think there's a way, if somebody is trying to, you know, do something to inflame us, you know, and this does happen in prison situations as well as outside prison. If somebody's trying to inflame us, if we don't bite the hook, then the other person's standing there with it. Yeah? And so there's different ways to not bite the hook, but maintain your own integrity. You know, the guys in the prison all feel that if you don't retaliate, then everybody is not going to respect you. They're going to walk all over you because they're equating fear and respect. If somebody fears you, that means they respect you. Yeah. I don't think so. To me, if somebody fears you, they don't have any respect. They may do what you want, but it doesn't mean they respect you. Okay? Whereas I think when we are able to hold calm and hold steady and have a sense of our own dignity and integrity, and we're not falling into fear or intimidation, then people pick up on that too. Yeah? Because, for example, in prison, you know, if somebody comes and cuts you off in line, like in the chow line, if somebody butts in front of you, that can start a whole fight. I mean, it's huge, because they're disrespecting you by cutting in front of you, and if you don't stand up for them, it means that you're afraid of them, and then they're going to keep taking advantage of you and everything. And I think in that kind of situation, there's a way where you just step back and you say, "Please, come on in." And you say it sincerely, you know, and you say it with ownership of the place and saying, "Please come, stand here," you know? And then you're not biting the hook. Yeah? And they're kind of left like, okay, you know? Another way to handle situations like that is to make a joke. Yeah? Somebody's trying to, you know, a situation's going in a way where somebody's, you know, you're just repeating an old habit or something, then make a joke. A third way to diffuse it is change the subject. Yeah? So give them what they want, but give them what they want with a sense of your own integrity. Yeah? Or make a joke, or change the topic, or do something that they don't expect at all. Yeah? I heard a story of one woman walking in Central Park, and she was carrying some packages, and she heard somebody walk behind her, and they kept following her, and you know, Central Park isn't so safe. And at one point, she turned around and she looked at the guy and said, "Here, can you carry this for me?" and handed him all the parcels and kept walking. And he was so stunned, he followed her to the edge of the park. And then she said, "Thank you very much," took the packages and left. Yeah, so sometimes doing something completely unexpected like that. I heard of another woman who was, some guy was following her or something. I was saying, "Hey baby, come on, let's go out tonight." And she turned around and she said, "I'm sorry, I'm busy this evening." Yeah, so sometimes those kinds of ways can help, But the basic thing in here is, this push button reaction we have to buy into whatever energy somebody is dishing out. So if they're angry at us, we get angry at them. If they hit us, we hit them. If they criticize us to our face or behind our back, we do the same. If they insult and abuse us, we do the same back. And then what's the effect of that is it usually just escalates. Isn't it? Usually escalates. It doesn't stop it. Okay. That one's more difficult to keep, wouldn't you say? Yeah. Difficult to keep. So I think kind of in your meditation, think of some examples in your life and then think of, how could you handle it? Because the key to handling this is not coming up with some nifty little strategy. The key to handling it is, how do I keep my own mind calm? So how can I look at this situation and be completely calm and reply to it? And then number 18, were there any questions about that one? Okay. Chandra Goman says, neglecting those who are angry. Here it says, neglecting those who are angry with oneself by not trying to pacify their anger. We have to understand what this means completely, because if we misunderstand it, we take it to mean becoming a people pleaser or caving in. Okay, and that's not what this precept is talking about. Both the 18th and 19th secondary misdeeds are described as failures to stop the flow of anger. However, they are two distinct misdeeds, for in one case the fault is not stopping the flow of people's anger towards us, and in the other, not ending our feelings of anger towards others. The 18th misdeed, therefore, is doing nothing to soothe the anger of people who are furious with us and just letting it run its course. So somebody's really mad at us and we just say, I don't care. People may be upset with us either because we have done something to harm them or because they believe that we have. Regardless, he says we are the cause of their ire. I disagree. I don't think we're the cause of their ire. I think we're the condition of it. Okay? If in this situation we do nothing to tranquilize them by apologizing or explaining ourselves because we are jealous, proud, spiteful, or angry ourselves, we commit a secondary misdeed associated with afflictions. When we neglect to placate them out of laziness or sloth, the misdeed is dissociated from afflictions. Okay? Now, this does not mean, so it's saying somebody's mad at us, that we should do something to assuage their anger. That's fine. Okay? Now, and why do we do that? Because we care about them. We don't want them to suffer from their anger. When we can explain something to them, that would ease their mind. So if we've made a mistake, to go and apologize. If we haven't made a mistake, to go and give them the information they need, but in some way to help pacify their anger because we care about them. Okay. Now, if we don't understand this properly, and if our afflictions get involved, we take it as, somebody's mad at me, it's my fault. Okay? I'm guilty. I'm bad because they're mad at me. Therefore, I need to go and apologize so that they won't be mad at me, because, and then maybe I can stop feeling so guilty. But it usually doesn't solve our guilt, because our problem has been that we've taken on something that is not our responsibility. Somebody else is getting angry is their responsibility. Our actions are our responsibility. Okay? So if we take this precept to mean I'm responsible for their anger, therefore I have to become a people pleaser, or I have to cave in, or I have to just tell them what they want to hear, then our motivation is rotten, isn't it? Because our motivation is completely self-centered. You know, I feel bad about myself, and because I feel like I'm the cause of this, and the only way I can feel better is to go and apologize to them. But even that doesn't make us feel better, because when we have that kind of mind, we haven't been able to separate what's our responsibility from what isn't our responsibility. Okay? So you have to really be able to separate that out, you know, and then go and help them, not because we're afraid that they won't like us, not because we want to have a good reputation, not because we feel guilty, but because we really care about them. And we realize that they're upset, they're unhappy because they're upset, they're creating negative karma through their anger, and we don't want them to create negative karma and experience the results of it. So do you see the difference in the motivation between these two things? And it's so easy, if we don't understand this clearly, and if we can't identify the things in our mind, that then we can get really tripped up about this. Yeah. So it's something we have to be very careful with, and see what's my responsibility and what isn't. And then deal with what is our responsibility. And if we acted obnoxious, then we need to say something if somebody's mad, you know, and apologize. And if they've misunderstood something because we, you know, didn't explain ourselves clearly, then we need to, you know, and they're upset about that, then we need to go and explain that. You know, that part is our responsibility. Yeah, their anger is their responsibility. Mm-hmm.
The doctor shared something 2 weeks ago on NBC that really struck really deep for me, is that Marshall says that if we take responsibility for other people's feelings, there's no way we can ever give them empathy.
Mm-hmm. We can never give them any empathy. Yeah, so if we take responsibility for other people's feelings, there's no way to give them empathy. Yeah, yeah. But it's true, because we become complete people pleasers and guilt-ridden. Yeah. And we can't really offer compassion and empathy in that kind of state. Donnie?
Mm-hmm. So what about when you have, or when you know that this person will not understand what you are saying?
Mm-hmm. So somebody didn't understand what you're saying?
Yeah.
And they're angry because of that?
Yes, and also before, maybe now already, okay, this person wouldn't understand that you said about him.
Okay, so it's a situation where they didn't understand what you were saying. They're so upset that if you tried to explain to them right now, they couldn't hear you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Then better to leave it. Yeah? Give them some space to calm down, and then at a later time go. Because it doesn't make any sense to talk to somebody who is so revved up that they can't.
You have to go and speak it out. If you have the feeling, no, this person will not understand, definitely not understand that. Maybe
Yeah. Yeah, then you, okay. But if you feel like they definitely won't understand, then, and you feel it'll only make them angrier and more upset, then leave it. But don't say to yourself they will never ever understand, because there could come a time when they will understand, you know? And so keep that door open, and when you sense a shift in them, then you can go and talk to them about it. Hmm? Yeah? Yeah, uh-huh.
That word we use a lot, always.
Yes.
Like always.
Mm-hmm.
Like that.
Yeah. Right. This is, what you're pointing out is very good, that we think it's always like that. They're never going to understand. And so these are very black and white ways of thinking, aren't they? You know? And the world's not like that. How can we say they will always be like that? They'll never understand. I just got a letter from one of the inmates that I correspond with. He's been in for quite some time, and his mother was very, very mad at him about what he was accused of doing that got him in, although he says he didn't do it. And his mother, you know, has been not speaking to him and not letting him contact his daughters and talking to the daughters against their father and all sorts of things, you know. And just recently she called the prison and asked to talk to him because she's dying. And so they talked, and he said, we buried the hatchet. So we talked for 15 minutes on one day. We talked, you know, again, a couple of days later. Yeah? So it's so sad that the mother waited that long. But you know, if he was really stubborn, when she called and asked to speak to him, he could have said, no, I'm not going to talk to her. It's no use. She'll never understand. She's always been like this. But he didn't do that, did he? He didn't retaliate. He didn't reject. Yeah? He accepted the phone call, you know, and it was nice that the chaplain warden let it go through, and he talked to her, and you know, and they were able to forgive. And I think that, you know, that was helpful not only for the mother who's dying, but also for the son who continues to live. Yeah? So to not, you know, make hard and fast rules about how a relationship's going to go. We really don't know. Yeah? Okay. An exception, okay, there are exceptions to this, is made for a good purpose. It is better for the other people to be ignored because in the long run it will allow them to reinforce their good qualities and weaken their faults. So if you think ignoring them, you know, might make them think about what they've done, or, you know, give them the opportunity to actually work through their own anger and own their own anger themselves, then, you know, it's not a fault to not go and talk to them. And then there's 5 exceptions that concern the object. So one is the angry person himself is malicious, ill-behaved, has bad intentions, and wants to make us apologize to him. Okay? So if it's that kind of situation, then, you know, there's no need to go and do it, because the other person's being manipulative. Okay? They don't have a good intention in there. And then second is apologizing would aggravate the situation by irritating the person further and perhaps leading to a fight. And you know, sometimes situations are such where the other person is really raw, and if you go and you might have calmed down, but they may not have, and if you try and talk it out yet and they aren't calm, they just get more upset. So in those kind of situations, better to wait until they've really calmed down. Third is the person is naturally patient and would be indifferent to our apology. In other words, the other person, you know them and they've forgotten about it already, and so, yeah, no need to do it. 4 is the person does not particularly want us to say that we're sorry. Yeah, so that person may not feel that it's appropriate, or they may not, need that or want that. And then 5th is our apologies would embarrass or disconcert the person. Yeah, so there's certain situations in which if we apologized, it is somebody else could feel very, very embarrassed by it. Yeah, and so in that situation, then it's better not to. Okay. So then I don't want to get into the next one because we don't have enough time really for a discussion on it. Are there any questions about this? Yeah.
I have a question, but maybe it is a question. It's a situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that time when you were talking about people in the prison
Mm-hmm.
handling, things with creative, And I'm puzzling over this when my son, when he was like 14, someone in the school started, I'll use a strong word, but kind of terrorizing him, a boy who had a lot of problems. And it kept escalating because my son wouldn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
It came to knocking his books out of his hand and stealing his candy from him, and just kind of whenever he could see him, try to keep him around. And my son wouldn't, we tried to problem solve, he wouldn't take any of the solutions. Like, I couldn't go talk to the school because that would embarrass him. His mom had to come in. His dad couldn't. We couldn't talk to the parents of the kids because he would find out it was him and just escalate. There seemed to be almost nothing. So finally, after this went on for a while, I told him to be ready to fight this boy, which is not a thing I would usually say. And I was just like, I don't know what else to do now. So, and then what I told them is, but your goal is to not fight him. But you need to be ready to do it, and you need to let him know that you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And if he does one more thing, you are going to fight him, and it won't matter who wins, you're going to hurt him. And then he said, well, I'll get thrown out of school. And I said, well, then I'm going to come in and tell the whole thing about why aren't kids safe, and this is the extreme we have to get to. And the very next day, when I picked my son up, he was so triumphant. It was really interesting. He was sitting in a room alone, and the boy came in with a couple of his friends, and there were all these chairs that were open to sit in. So they came over to Sam and said, we want to sit here, get up and get out. And he said, Mom, I was just shaking, but I knew I wasn't going to do it. So he said, I just sat there and said, no, we're done. And he said, he was like, I don't know what he's going to do, And the kid leaned over and said, I'm going to hit you so hard in the head, you're never going to give up. And Sam just stayed there, didn't say anything. Nothing happened, and the kid left. And he never messed with him again. And I said, were you ready to, take him on it? He said, yeah, I was going to, if I had to, but I didn't even say it to him. He said it was something about just, I knew I was done with it. So not very many words went by, but so I don't know, was it violent? Was it, I don't know, it was those questions to me.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, okay, so a situation of bullying, extreme bullying. And this is, their parents, people are now talking about this in school, about how kids bully each other. And so you're saying that you tried to brainstorm with Sam many different ways to handle it. You're getting involved, talking to the principal, talking to the teacher, talking to the parent, or things he can do, and he couldn't accept anything. And then one day you told him to just be ready to fight him, even though your goal was not to fight. And and so the next day when the boy came in, and Sam was sitting somewhere, and the boy said, "Get up, I want to sit there." Sam just sat there and said, "No, we're done." And that's what I meant by having our own dignity, having our own sense of what it is. You know, in relationship to the prison thing, of, you know, no. And how Sam told you, you know, if he had to fight him, he would.
Yeah.
But the guy knew that. And that was what the other boy needed, somebody to draw a line. He was pushing, 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 and nobody drew a line. And finally, when Sam drew a line, he respected that.
Even though he had to say something more threatening.
Yeah, even though he threatened to punch him in the head, he won't so hard he wouldn't get up.
He walked away and never bothered him.
And after that he walked away, didn't bother him again. But it was because Sam said, "This is it." And he didn't have to say, "This is it," and, you know, yell and scream and It was just, "This is it."
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've heard of that before. Somebody else told me a story like that before, where they, yeah, that's who I'm thinking of, exactly. Yeah. Do you want to tell John Pell's story?
John Pell said that he said, "I will fight, and we'll both end up worse for it." He reasoned with them. He stood up for it. He reasoned with them, and he just took that tact. In the moment he went into prison, he prepared himself when he knew he was going to prison. He had this kind of demeanor where he was willing and he was big enough to could fight. And he said, "I will fight," and, you know, he may end up in absence, and this is where you want to end up, so he reasoned with them, because he's good with words. He's good on his, quick on his feet.
Yeah.
So he used his talent to stay out of fight.
Yeah.
But he also had that dignity thing going.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, because if you're firm, then people know not to mess with you. Yeah? Yeah.
I had the same problem in high school with a girl that always had these things. That I don't want it to have a problem or something like that. And one day she comes with me and says, "I wait you at when you finish the food at outside. I wait you." And it was so, because I'm not a fight person, I don't like that thing. But I think I was thinking, if I'm not going to be there, she's going to every day. She's going to, and I'd be there with like this, but I'd be there. And she never comes to that.
Oh, you bet she did come.
No, she didn't come.
Oh, wow.
I was there. Maybe she knows that she saw me that I was there.
She probably saw
didn't
you,
know
yes.
that I was like that, but I was
Yeah.
But yeah, she didn't know that.
Yeah.
But I was there
Yeah.
with a, I don't know what was going to happen, because it was a girl very, very, it has a lot of hungry that
Yeah.
but nothing happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nothing.
Same thing. Yeah. Sometimes people, what they need is they just need.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's been my observation in situations like that the bully or whoever it is wants to exercise some control.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't allow, when you respond with fear or anger or in any way,
Mm-hmm.
then they see that they can control you by pushing you for that moment. And as soon as a person just draws a line or just shows that they're not under that person's control, many times they just back out, because it's some, if I think of it in an NBC way, there's just some need there that they're trying to satisfy that, and you're just simply saying to them, "I'm not the person to satisfy your needs."
Right. Yeah. Uh-huh.
There are I mean,
Yeah.
because even well, to friends of mine happened something more or less like that, and they stay very calm. It was in India. So one of them knew some like prayers, Hindu prayers,
Mm-hmm.
and she started to do that and said, okay, do this work. Just first think about what would happen if I were your mother. And these guys couldn't get an erection, and they were very drunk and they let them.
Wow.
The night in the highway, but they let them go. Yeah. Because they didn't show that fear that they
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Control.
Yeah. Yeah. That often in these kinds of situations, the issue is one person trying to control another person. And when you just stand up, and you don't need to be aggressive, you don't need to be angry, you just need to be firm. Yeah. Then they back down because they realize they're not going to get the thrill that they want out of controlling you. Mm-hmm.
The understand is from 18 and 19, or especially 19, it's about purifying too.
It's about what?
It's about purifying too, right?
Mm-hmm. 19?
Yeah.
19 is refusing to accept the apologies of others.
And yeah, because Navama saying you have to purify. You have to purify the situation. If you make somebody angry,
Mm-hmm.
then try to clean this up.
Oh, okay, I didn't understand. Yeah, I didn't understand. When you said purify, I thought you meant doing like the 4 opponent powers or something. Yeah, no, whenever there's a mess with the person, you try and clean it up. But if you know that you're trying to clean it up is going to make it worse, then leave it for the time being. Mm-hmm. Or if you think that it's better for the other person, let them sit with it. You know, then let them sit with it. But if you do that because you're mad and it's a way of retaliating, then that's not the right motivation.